Welcome to the Transforming Trauma Podcast, a complex trauma podcast through the NARM Training Institute. My name is Sarah Buino, and I'm so excited to be sharing today's interview with you. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. The NARM Training Institute has a very special announcement. We are offering the Level 2 NARM Therapist Training online for the very first time. For anyone who may have been waiting for NARM training to come to your city or country, the wait is over. You can join us online starting in January 2021 for this NARM therapist training for mental health professionals working with complex trauma. This online training is an exciting opportunity to receive advanced, specialized training in addressing attachment, relational, developmental, and cultural and intergenerational trauma. For more information and to register, please visit www.narmtraining.com/level2online. We look forward to you joining our growing international NARM community and are inspired to work with you to bring NARM to your clients and communities in order to transform trauma. Welcome to today's episode, listeners. Thanks so much for being here today. So it's a little weird that I'm the guest for today's episode, and I have to introduce you to myself. But I figured I'll do what we do in all the episodes and tell you a little bit more about me. So my name is Sarah Buino, and I'm a therapist, teacher, speaker, and podcaster. I own a psychotherapy practice in Chicago called Head Heart Therapy. And in addition to being the host of Transforming Trauma, I host my own podcast called Conversations with a Wounded Healer, where I examine the intersectional journey of healing ourselves while caring for others. So Brad thought it might be a good idea for he and I to sit down and talk about kind of this year in review in the podcast and learn a little bit more about how I came to NARM and how it's helped me. So I hope you really enjoy myself and Brad chatting about NARM.
Hello, Sarah. Welcome.
Hi, Brad. We're like, wait, how do we do? We've reversed roles. How do we even start this thing?
I know. Yeah, well, we'll tell our listeners what we're doing here is we're reversing roles. So I'm going to be the host and interviewing you. And, I think the first place I want to start is just how grateful we are for you and I am for you. And this was just kind of this idea in my head a couple of years ago, and you were the perfect person, and you've brought so much heart to it and professionalism and care. And we just are so appreciative of how amazing you've done, both, on the outside, but also just all the heart that people don't necessarily get to see from the back end. And it's very reflective of the NARM model. And there couldn't be a better representative of this than you have been. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's humbling. And I said to you at one point in a discussion we had that it works because this is just how I am. And so just being me and the way I show up is what you need. So it's a perfect marriage.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. And you really have taken this model, and I think it shows in the way that you hold space for these interviews. And I mean, I get so much feedback about the way that you ask questions. And I mean, in some ways you're doing NARM through the Transforming Trauma episodes. And I think people are really drawn to that. And so, yeah, just so for people know, we thought we would celebrate our 1-year anniversary.
Yay!
Yeah. By getting to know you more. I mean, we've gotten these glimpses over the last year, but I would love just to get to know you more. And also, how has this been? Maybe that's a place for us to start. It's just how has this year of doing the Transforming Trauma podcast been for you?
Well, I guess first, can I introduce myself, tell people a little bit more about what
Of course, please. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason we got into this is because I do host my own podcast, Conversations with a Wounded Healer, where you and Larry were guests. And I've been doing that for several years and just thought, well, why not do another podcast? So I do that. I run a practice called Head Heart Therapy in Chicago, and it's been a big learning curve in how to be a boss over the past 7 years of doing that. And I teach at Loyola University in Chicago, a clinical addictions course, and then also do training and speaking gigs and all that sort of stuff. So doing the podcast and I've been a performer my whole life. So I think that's part of the ease that I feel in being, even though no one can see me, I still feel like I'm on stage, and I'm always conscious, of I'm sure you feel that way too as a teacher, right? Always conscious of how people are viewing you. So from the perspective of doing a podcast, it's just super fun. I love having meaningful conversation is my favorite thing to do. So I get to do it for a living is awesome. And I'm very aware of NARM's growth and trajectory, and I'm so honored to be here now because I think if I would have even come in now instead of then, like I wouldn't have had this opportunity and to I feel like I'm equally a fly on the wall and I get to see what goes on behind the scenes a little bit. And I'm truly just so honored that I get to have these conversations and meet more people in NARM and outside of NARM. And it's awesome.
Well, there's kind of two directions we could go in, but I kind of am drawn to the opposite direction of what we had or what I had thought about. But maybe we should start with how you came to NARM.
Mhm.
What brought you in? What was your own trajectory to get you into this community, into the training?
Yeah, well, the first time I heard about NARM, so our mutual friend Livia Budries had told me about it, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to it, whatever. Who knows what was going on at that time? But then Bianca, who is, I think, our second episode or our first interview, I think, or second, whatever. We'll look her up. Bianca is a friend of mine. We've been in a practice owner group for several years, and I saw her change. I saw her, there was a light inside of her that just started shining more brightly. And I was like, girl, what are you on? Because I want some. And she was like, it's NARM. It's transformed me. And I'm like, I'd been doing sensory motor training, sensory motor psychotherapy, and, various things. It just didn't feel like the right fit for me and some other outside personal stuff going on with people in the cohort. So I wanted to switch. And I'm I'm so glad NARM has just felt like home to me. And I had posted on our little Facebook group a couple weeks ago, like NARM just feels true instead of trying to make up new stuff. It's just, it names what is. And that is what just feels so resonant and so easy for me about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think we talked about that maybe in the first episode that we did together, actually, a little bit about your connection to Bianca and watching her shine. And I love that story. And I think a lot of people have a similar story of like just seeing a colleague or even a client that comes back and has been introduced to NARM, read the book or something, and gets turned on by something. So one of the things that listeners who haven't been through our trainings don't know about is in the last module, we do this kind of reflective exercise about how NARM has impacted you professionally and also how NARM has impacted you personally. And maybe we could start with the professional. Like, how would you boil it down to how NARM has changed? Because you've been a therapist and a teacher for a long time. So how has NARM impacted you in a professional level?
It's helped me organize concepts that I was watching happen with my clients, but I didn't know how to help them. I was working with shame via Brene Brown's stuff, and I kept seeing chronic shame come up for people over and over again. And the tools that I had didn't really make a dent in it. And so the way that NARM conceptualizes shame and creates the space for self-compassion to kind of just naturally arise, it is transformative. And so I have one client who is just, he can do it so beautifully. And she's like, 2020 has been the best year of my life.
Wow.
And that's saying a lot.
Yeah,
but a lot of it is NARM because she's changed her relationship with herself and she's given herself more space to be authentic. And just having a framework, it organizes.
You were mentioning before we started recording that some of your staff has started the online basics training that we do and has been really turned on by NARM. Are there any common themes you're hearing from them about how it's impacted their work or what they're so excited about?
I think they also feel too like it just fits. One Matt, who you'll get to know, he's always in supervision. He's just been really personally reflective. And so I said to him, like, this is the perfect model because you learn by doing with yourself, just like I do. And he is already really, in the past 2 weeks since he's done the training, I see him deepening his understanding. I literally said that to him today. I'm like, you've always been inquisitive and trying to learn, but like the depth that he's going to now so quickly has just been incredible. And Raelle will be mortified that I'm talking about her, but I don't care. The way that her heart has opened and shifted, and she was in community mental health, which is like a really closed and hierarchical system. And at my practice, I try to be the opposite of that. And, there was a lot of kind of resistance to being so open-hearted, and now she's like, I get it, I see it, I feel it. And it's just been amazing to watch like that light turn on for her too. And that was literally only after one weekend. They've just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah. Well, we had a good weekend together. Yeah. That heartfulness piece is such a missing ingredient. I mean, we've talked about that before, but what a missing ingredient for community mental health and just psychology in general. And, you know, it's one of the things I'm hoping that we can continue to really highlight, because it's one of the distinguishing factors of NARM is just this real focus on how we bring heart into the work. And it's weird even to talk about it like that, because it's hard to bring heart into the work. It's kind of like we have to, like you said, really find it ourselves and then shine that light with our clients or our colleagues. But again, it's something that you really model well for us. So how about the personal level? Like, how has it impacted you, as much as you're comfortable sharing?
I mean, I really don't mind sharing, because that's part of it, right? Modeling our own journeys. And, you know, the past 3 years have been really hard with various traumas, and not having exclusive trauma training before I started SP. I think SP like opened Pandora's box for me. And all of a sudden I was starting to recognize that, oh, I had trauma too. I used to think that trauma had happened to somebody else. I didn't really understand what it was. And NARM has helped me name even more explicitly just how bad it was. And I still almost have a hard time saying that, because my mom was a super martyr. And so I don't I never want to like go into that box, but it was bad. And of course I'm going to cry. Like, I blamed myself, of course. And NARM helped me really understand that it wasn't my fault. And I did have capacity to change. And it took quite a while for me to be able to really step into agency. And, you know, I identify a lot with the autonomy style. And if folks have read the book or taken any of the trainings, you know what that is. But I know that you've said that folks who struggle with autonomy often struggle more to take agency. And that was my experience. And I would then use that against myself even more. So it's like the shame on top of the shame, shaming yourself for shaming yourself. And I ended up going to a trauma treatment program this summer because I was barely holding it together before COVID. All the balls in the air, and I was overworking, and it was too much. And so I had to get away. And the time away, watching that nothing fell down, like things moved on without me. And where I think some people may feel like that's not a good thing, like that's what I needed. I needed to know that the world does turn without me. And that taking care of myself first actually is what I've needed to do all along. And that space that I created is NARM finally then clicked all of a sudden. It all of a sudden made sense. And I'm obviously not finished with my work, but I'm over a really, really big obstacle. I've been doing self-compassion trainings for several years now, and I was doing a couple over the past several weeks, and I was like, I don't relate to this the same way anymore, because I don't have to try. It just is. Like, the self-love is just there. I don't have to push for it. I don't have to force it anymore. And it's mostly because of NARM. I mean, I've been doing intensive therapy for 12 years now, but a lot of it is NARM.
Yeah, the language that came to my mind as you were talking is that you've really been able to embody it on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And live it more directly. And which, again, I think is one of the unique qualities of NARM compared to some of the other psychological models out there, that it's really about the lived experience. And you know, we talk a lot about objectification in NARM. I like to talk about subjectification, that we're really turning ourselves from objects into subjects. And I don't know what's going on inside you right now, but my fantasy is that the tears are somehow expressing that you're finding your humanity more.
100%. And that's, you were the one who really, honestly, like probably like drove one of the last nails in the coffin, but in a good way, when we were doing a consultation and you said, it sounds like you're objectifying yourself. And I was like, I want to cuss right now. There's no words other than a cuss word, but I won't say it. But I was just like, oh my God, that is it. And I am doing this to myself.
And then you went to get support, and you went to a place that, you know, was aligned with you. It wasn't one of these places that you knew that you were going into good hands there.
Right.
And I don't know how much you feel comfortable talking about that experience, but I'm just curious, did you get NARM there? Did you get NARM
No,
therapy?
I
No,
didn't.
okay.
I
Because
didn't. We did revisioning was mostly revisioning and SE.
okay,
Yeah.
because there are a few NARM therapists there, right?
I know. I don't know why they chose to not do that.
hmm
It's a question I'll have to ask Camille later, but yeah.
Yeah. Because you went to Sierra Tucson, which is a place that we're
Mm-hmm.
also been working with some of the staff to bring NARM in because they are one of the more
Mm-hmm.
cutting edge treatment centers out there. And something
Mm-hmm.
again you and I have talked about. It's just it's a sad state. You can add this to the list of American sad states of America right now, but just the lack of support and resources
Mm-hmm.
for people. I mean, luckily for you and I, we have more resources.
Mm-hmm.
We have the ability to kind of get the support that we need if we need to, but there's just so many people out there. And
Right.
I know for you and I, this is a shared mission for our podcasts that, it's cool that anyone can listen to it for free. You just need to be able to hook up to some kind of device and you can
Yeah.
listen to this. And I love that because it's like bringing the power back to the people, this knowledge that used to be
Yeah.
hidden in all these really complicated research articles and behind college doors with a huge price
Mm-hmm.
tag. It's like now we can really get this work out and then people
Mm-hmm.
get to do with it whatever way they relate to it, but hopefully in a way that will support them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was literally just thinking that this morning because I was listening to something about it's called Seen on Radio, and they have different series. And I listened to the Seeing White, which is all about just whiteness essentially
Mhm.
and race. And then I was listening to the patriarchy one, and I'm like, I missed the whole like women's studies thing. I didn't do that in college, and I felt like I missed a huge piece of education, but I can get it for free now.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's part
Mm-hmm.
of the shift we're having in our culture
Mm-hmm.
about the power dynamics because I'm not a real history buff, but I know that when the Bible got translated into,
Mm-hmm.
and was able that people could access the Bible without having to go through all the orthodoxy,
Mm-hmm.
it really revolutionized Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it's like there's something happening like that now. This
Mm-hmm.
whole movement to decolonize all these systems is really
Yep.
a way of helping people get back the knowledge and the wisdom and giving it to them and trusting that, of course, we're going to make lots of mistakes along the way, but ultimately there's self-determination there, which is really just
Mm-hmm.
another way of saying agency.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's funny the shift that I have made. I was always super interested in macro work and changing systems, but it was just too overwhelming for me
hmm
because of the way like I would relate to like racism is my problem and I have to fix it single-handedly.
hmm
And now that I can shift the way I relate to myself, I feel more empowered to step into more like macro change. And now I'm thinking, okay, how do I do advocacy work? What does that look like? And yeah, giving more power to more people. And NARM has helped me create for myself. I'll use agency language, but has helped me create that for myself. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into this other direction of that I wanted to talk to you about is we've had some awesome guests in this last year. Like, I mean, I feel shivers as I think about some of the people we've had on this podcast. And I thought I would just start with you. Like, what are some interviews or even some topics or people that really stood out for you over this last
Mm-hmm.
year?
Well, most recently, and this won't be released, I know, for another month or so, but the most recent episode with Dick Schwartz, that one was really like spiritually resonant for me. So I'm really excited for people to hear that. All the episodes about like centering the Jewish experience were so impactful. And I was thinking, especially today, like why that is. And the way that Lynn spoke, there was something that helped me shift an understanding. I've always struggled, like my mom wished she was Jewish. It's this really weird thing, not in an objectifying way, but she wanted to be closer to Jesus. And so she was like, she learned how to speak Hebrew and all these things. And so we grew up like thinking Jews are the best. And so like literally I could not understand what I like literally couldn't understand all the historical context of it. And there was something, I don't know, something just like opened a deeper space in my heart to really truly feel the grief. And yeah, I don't even like really have words for it, but that one was super deep for me.
Mhm.
And your conversation with Donnie too, and our conversation together, I felt really honored that you would share that with me and share it with listeners. And topic wise, Caroline's interview, I think it was probably at the time that it was happening. Like I was so hyper vigilant with COVID, and she talked about the concept of relative safety. And there was something in that just like really took care of me. And
Mm,
she didn't even know, like, I'm not telling people like, I feel crazy right now. So help me feel better. But I mean, that's one of the gifts of these conversations. I mean, it's just like, as a therapist, our clients often heal us and they have no idea. I think these conversations are the same.
mm. Yeah, that's so interesting because we've never had a chance to talk about this. And,
Mm-hmm.
I love that you get to come out from behind the mic and get to share about your experience because you're part of this. And again, that's the feedback we get. It's like you couldn't have such a great podcast without Sarah being who she is. And so it's just so interesting to hear your impact and what you're taking from this. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those three episodes that we did around the Jewish experience obviously was very meaningful for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just been kind of a deepening process even since then. And I look
I
forward
bet.
to continuing to talk more about that. And I was really impacted by Claude's,
Oh, how could I forget? Yes.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
He's the best.
he's amazing. Yeah, Claude is one of our training assistants, and he's
Mm-hmm.
been really active with us in looking at our organization and also in our teaching. And the
Mm-hmm.
way he's holding these
Mm-hmm.
very controversial and hot and complex topics with such groundedness and spaciousness and
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfulness and carefulness. I just have been so impressed by him and really inspired and touched by him and really grateful that he's part of our leadership. And yeah, so I'm just kind of going through it, as we were planning to talk and just thinking
Mm-hmm.
about from the very beginning. I really also enjoyed the talk that you hosted, me, Stephanie, and Marcia, the three of
Yeah.
our faculty, right when COVID hit. And
Mm-hmm.
we were finding something really unique that was happening because we took all of our trainings online. And we were just finding that coming together with this community was such a huge resource. And
Yes.
I never thought of it so much, but all of a sudden, everyone, those first couple of months, most people were in isolation and dealing with just, this huge trauma that brings up all sorts of unresolved material for us. And
Mm-hmm.
just coming together around NARM and with people that we have a like-minded and that we both, we're all kind of oriented in the same direction. It was just really fun to have that time to reflect on our connection and how much we care about each other and how much we care about the work we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very touching one for me too, because they're also
Mm-hmm.
two dear people in my life. So
That was so clear. It was such a yeah, it was just chummy is the word that's coming to me, and that kind of almost seems to diminish it, but it was like the friendship between you was so evident, and it was really lovely to witness and to be a part of.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and just doing a podcast, it's like I'm both very proud of what we're doing, and also it's just like I want to share with listeners just like how interesting this process has been too. Like,
Mhm.
we've reached out to a whole sorts of people. Some people have said no, some people have said I'll come later. Some people jump at the chance and are super excited. Some people are reaching out to us that want to come on. It's just been,
Mm.
it's just interesting to like this is a whole new world for me. I know you've been doing this longer, but the podcast thing has been a really interesting process too. And I don't know if you just had any general thoughts about just what it's like to be supporting and shepherding this process, but
Yeah, there's so much that happens behind the scenes that people don't even think about because it's free, right? So people may not recognize the value and the money that goes into it, like truthfully, right? I always have to say on my podcast, this is not cheap, folks. Even though it's free for you, it's not cheap for us. But yeah, there's what I recognized, especially this year, because there was so much topical stuff happening that we had to
mm,
respond to, both in this podcast and my podcast, that I was like, oh, I'm a member of the media. I
mm,
never thought about myself that way before, but this year really made me feel like I needed to step up in terms of knowing what's going on in the world and responding to that in a thoughtful and heartful way.
mhm. Why do people, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but why do people say yes and why do people say no in terms of coming on the podcast? Do you have any thought on that?
Hmm. I mean, I think there's probably a million reasons that people say yes. Some of it is like me, they want to be on stage promoting their stuff, I think
Mhm.
is kind of the superficial reason. But I believe that at least a lot of transforming trauma, NARM folk anyway, are interested in sharing their hearts. And we're all NARM fanatics, so we just want to keep talking about it. So, I think that's probably, I hope, one of the reasons that people say yes. And people who say no, this isn't easy, I think, to share your story and to be vulnerable in front of, you have no idea how people are going to take this. And,
Yeah.
one thing I've really recognized is I talk so much I don't even know what I've said, and people will reflect back to me and be, "Oh, you said this thing that was so moving," and I'm like, "Oh, you're listening. Oh, yikes. Okay." I mean, I'm always trying to be mindful of what I say, but it's hard to put oneself in that position where your words are really being heard and being taken in, and that can just be too much for people who don't want to be in that spotlight.
Yeah. 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 I just feel like I'm such like a teacher at heart. I just feel like when I
Mhm.
have something that's exciting, I just like I will not say no to these things.
Right?
Like I'll just keep on saying yes because I love talking about this stuff, like you said, and
Mhm.
sharing it. And I know that I was hungry for like I knew I there was something inside me when I was younger that I wanted to learn and I didn't know how to
Mhm.
find it. And now is a very different time where we have all
Mhm.
this access to information that we didn't. I used to have the old encyclopedia books and stuff. And
Mhm.
now we have all this access to information, but I just love being part of like someone that just randomly finds our podcast because they typed in a
Mhm.
word and then they learn about these things that open up this whole world for them. That for me is so exciting. So, if we can be part of that on some level, I'm just
Mhm.
really excited to contribute to people's lives in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because now I'm recognizing like I don't get to hear the feedback because I hear it for my podcast, but I don't really get to hear it as much for that. So I love that people are randomly stumbling upon it. I mean, that's the hope, right? Is
Yeah.
that it gets into everybody's hands. So that's really cool to hear.
Mhm. When we came up with this phrase, transforming trauma, which I was surprised no one had done before, but glad that they didn't, because that's a great name for what we're doing here. But like, what does
Mhm.
it mean to you? Like when we introduced that, and now that you've been doing this for the last year, like, what does actually transforming trauma mean to you?
Mhm. Well, I think one of the aspects of NARM that's personally really important to me is an aspect that's beyond this is so heady. I'm sorry if it's too much, but like it's beyond here and now. It's like ether instead of
Mm,
like earth, water, fire, air. And I think of transformation as a similar kind of thing. It's beyond what is. And because when we talk about a NARM, kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Like if I have a wound and I can react to the wound in a way that I'm like empowered and I'm going to bulldoze my way through things, or I shame myself and I don't come out of that, like transformation is outside of that. It's bigger than that. And so personally, I couldn't imagine feeling the way about myself that I feel right now. And because I remember asking my therapist, what does self-love even feel like?
mm.
And I'd had fleeting moments of experiencing it. And I said before, like now it just is. It's just there. And that's beyond any expectation that I ever thought I would have. And that's what I think of when I think of transforming trauma.
I think we know the quote that's going to be at the top of our show notes right there. That was so touching. That was really sweet.
Thanks.
Yeah. Again, I think of it like professionally and personally, and I think personally it's the same that my experience similar to yours. It's like I just look back at myself pre-trauma and pre-understanding trauma, like you said, and then
Mm-hmm.
pre-NARM, and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
such a different person than I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, that self-love piece, again, I
Mm-hmm.
have strong connection survival style patterns. And for those of you that read the book know that self-love is really scary and really difficult, and being embodied, being in emotions, being in relationships, it's all very challenging and threatening. And
Mm-hmm.
so just my ability to not only be in my body, be in my emotions, be in relationships, but really find pleasure and
Mm-hmm.
engagement and growth and the vitality of all that. has just been so exciting. And so, I mean, I just feel like I'm a walking example of transforming trauma. And our work is so cool because we get to work with all these patients and clients that become walking examples too. And then they get to go back into their personal lives with their families, their relationships, their work. And that's what I do this for. I mean, I love that. And then one thing I was thinking as you were talking about the professional aspect is I think about like there's like 3 layers or 3 levels of clients who come in to work with us. And, you know, I don't know the exact numbers, I'm making this up, but I'd say like 70% of people that come to see a therapist, they generally want symptom reduction.
Yep.
You know, they have some kind of symptom that's causing distress, relationship, or, you know, an addictive behavior or whatever that is. And they just want that to quiet down. And they come in, and once that quiets down, they're pretty much good. I mean, they're okay. They can go back in their life, and then a lot of them don't continue with therapy, and that's fine. Then there's like the second layer, which is maybe like, I don't know, 15, 20% of people that are really, you know, maybe they realize that it's not just about the symptom, it's about like they have to have a new organization inside themselves. Like there's something that's disorganized that's leading to the symptoms, and they want to address that deeper level. And they're willing, even though it's potentially scary and painful, they're willing to go to that deeper level to get that reorganization. And then there's the smallest percentage of people that I think, you know, it's not just about the symptom reduction, it's not just about the reorganization, but it's when you start working with these deep core patterns, there's something larger than ourselves. There's a transformation that starts happening. And for lack of a better term, there's this term called post-traumatic growth, which is this idea that, you know, through our resolving our trauma, we can have much more fulfilled lives than we had before. And this idea of transformation is just such a big piece, because I think it's part of the trauma of disconnection from our tribal wisdom or our traditional ways is understanding that trauma is a fact of life, and that resolving trauma is actually built into all sorts of healing rituals, because they know that it's not just about recovering to where they were before the trauma, but it's about that these are windows or catalysts for growth and transformation. And I just love that NARM is a model that can work with all 3 of those levels. NARM can reduce symptoms. It does reduce people's symptoms. It definitely is oriented in working with supporting a reorganization in people's systems. And then for people that are willing to go to that deeper place that, you know, we've had a few guests talk about the spiritual levels of experience. I think that NARM is also a vehicle for that as well.
I think you're totally right on those statistics. Like that's, you know, when I'm supervising my staff, I have a small caseload and they've been with me forever. But when I hear about their experience with their clients, their struggle is like they want everybody to be in that top like 2%. And that I had that conversation with one of the staff today. Like, this is the best he can do at this point, and we can't necessarily get all the information at once. It would be too overwhelming. But I'm gonna brag on my staff. My staff are awesome, and the desire to go to that level with me and bring their clients there. I'm just excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited that they're part of our community. That's really like I was saying before, I can't wait to get to know them. It's hard online to get to know people in the same way, but I'm looking forward to having opportunities of either online or in person next year, hopefully. I was curious about, I talked a little bit about like my hope for the impact of the Transforming Trauma podcast. Like, what's your hope? What would you like to see in terms of the impact?
Well, I think in general, I want more people, like you talked about power going back to the people, and until consumers of mental health recognize what they're not getting, no systems are going to change. And so my hope is that a lot of people can listen to this and recognize like, whoa, that's not what's happening in my therapy space. Like, how do I get that? And then that's sort of like from the bottom up kind of forcing a sea change in our profession. Cause you know, we've like crapped on CBT enough in here, but you know, just the manualized treatment is not cutting it, because it's really at that symptom reduction level. And I just don't think that the system is going to change until people are really asking for this work. And this is an introduction to give them a taste.
So true. I tell the story about like in the early mid 90s, my brother was graduating from medical school, and I went to his graduation ceremony. And there was Dr. Dean Ornish. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his
Mm-mm.
work, but he was big in the early days. He was big about talking about like lifestyle change, dietary change
Mm.
for like things like heart disease and stuff, part of the type A research that came out in the 80s and 90s. And he was the keynote speaker of this pretty prestigious medical school, and he got booed, like literally booed by these physicians of this in this room. And I
Wow.
remember being a young person, and I was just like looking around. I'm like, this guy is saying things that are so life affirming, and here the medical establishment is booing him. And I just
Mm.
think of how far we've come since then. 25
Mm-hmm.
years. Now you go to Omaha, Nebraska, or wherever, and there's yoga and meditation in
Mm-hmm.
hospitals. And that's not weird anymore. It's being taught in kindergarten, it's being in prisons, like all of these places. This isn't weird anymore. And so, I mean, this is my hope about this trauma informed movement. It's like in 10,
Mm-hmm.
15 years from now, and hopefully Kamala Harris has experience with working with ACEs and
Mm-hmm.
understanding developmental trauma. I mean, I just feel like there's something that's in the field, in the larger
Mm-hmm.
culture that
Yep.
is changing. And I'm hoping that CBT and all these other models will really take it seriously and integrate, because if not,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to get left behind.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, it's great. And I hope we have more conversations. I know we're having someone from the object relations background that's going to be coming on as a guest, who's, I think, the director of the James Masterson Institute. And, so we're going to be having different kind of guests. It's going to be nice for us to continue to have these kind of cross, because even when we have people like Dick Schwartz or Gabor Mate, they're in our same bubble. And I'm excited to reach out to the bubble and see if we can find common ground. For me, that's something that excites me. So
Yeah.
I was curious, like, as we start kind of wrapping up, about anything that you would like listeners to kind of know about in terms of either the podcast or about NARM. This is your opportunity to put a little plug in about, anything that you think would be useful for people to know just about NARM that maybe hasn't been spoken.
I mean, I feel like when I talk about NARM, it sounds like a cult, and I don't want to do that.
That's another podcast. Yeah.
I know, right? It really is just so transformational that I cannot stop blabbing about it. And it's funny, on my podcast, I talk about it all the time, and I'm always like, "Oh, you guys are probably sick of hearing it," but no one's told me that. I'm just like afraid people are going to think it's not legit because I won't shut up about it. But I'm just so glad that the trainings are going so well, and they're going to be more NARM therapists, because I know in Chicago everybody's full right now. So we're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, who can take a client? Nobody." So the more NARM therapists we have, the better I think we're going to be able to address after this year, like the PTSD and CPTSD that's like going to
Yeah.
come out of all of this is going to be tremendous. And our caseloads are full because people are already recognizing that. So we just need more people in the NARMY to help support that.
So how about for you? Last question here is for you. Just like, where are you going? Where's your future? What are you hoping for your professional pathway ahead?
Well, like I said, I feel so expanded, and that's helping me step into more advocacy. And I just joined with an organization that's an advocacy organization for therapists. And so one thing we're talking about is starting a committee to really challenge the insurance companies. And
Mm,
being in the Midwest, everybody expects to use their insurance here. I
yeah.
know it's not that way in most markets, but there's a lot of barriers to really providing good care. I also really personally would love to see something open up in between individual once a week outpatient and intensive outpatient,
Uh,
because we've talked so much about how they're orphans that don't
mm,
belong with me as an individual therapist, and
mhm.
yet there's nowhere else for them to go. So I'd love to like envision something that creates a shift there. And my fantasy that I just came up with yesterday is I totally want to meet AOC and get on some sort of like committee for her to
Mm,
like represent mental health in a Medicare for all sort of situation.
mm.
So I'm looking to change the world, which I always have been, but now I actually feel like I
Well,
have capacity for it.
and we have another guest, then we have to try to reach out to her and get her on.
Yes. I would die. Her and Lady Gaga, I will die. I will just die.
Yeah, those are two on our dream list there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. we have a dream list, and then we have the people that we love and dearly and also are excited to have them on. But yeah, we have some great guests coming up in 2021, and I'm just really excited for you to continue to kind of do this with us. And I hope I'll be able to come visit every once in a while and pop in and say hi. And but as we're wrapping up, you made a comment about like just how much back end stuff there is. And I just want to do a shout out for, we do it at the end, but really a shout out to all of our staff. We have a very small staff. We're a small organization, but we have a lot of people with just incredible heart and dedication, including all the training assistants and the faculty and even just the students, and just how much they've supported us over this last year in sharing the podcast with their friends and colleagues. And special shout out to Larry for developing this model and being my mentor for the last 20 years, and now having such a ripple effect onto all of us. And also to Tori for just all the hard work that she does in keeping us such a smooth, well-oiled machine. And everyone else, Stephanie and Marcia and everyone else. We're just, we are a community, and so many of us have found a professional home here. And we're living in a society that's very fragmented and disconnected. And so I just value you. I value our relationships. And I'm just really appreciative of having this platform that we can share this with the world. So thanks so much again, Sarah.
And thank you for trusting me. I still don't even really know how this happened, because we had a conversation at lunch and you were like, yeah, I want to start a podcast. I'm okay, I'll do that. And then all of a sudden we had a podcast and you really put a lot of trust in me. And I see that, I feel that, and I appreciate that. And I just thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on this journey together.
Same.
And I look forward to our future conversation. Well, we're going to be in a master's training together in a couple of weeks.
That's right. Can't wait.
Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. If you want to learn more, you can check out the show notes or visit us at www.narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. The NARM Training Institute has a very special announcement. We are offering the Level 2 NARM Therapist Training online for the very first time. The trauma field is evolving so quickly. Trauma-informed therapists who want to learn how to address the long-term impacts of adverse childhood experiences and complex post-traumatic stress disorder want to be trained in NARM, one of the first clinical models specifically designed to address ACEs and CPTSD. This online NARM therapist training is starting in January 2021 and is filling up fast. So if you're interested, we'd encourage you to register now to reserve your spot. Please visit www.narmtraining.com/level2online. That's www.narmtraining.com/level2online. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We really look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.